After I came home from a week's vacation back in July of this year, I received an email from some guy known as Matthew Patrick. I still hadn't fully woken up at this point, as it was still the morning, and I'd only seen the title, so I was scratching my head trying to figure out why that name was so familiar. Matthew Patrick. Theory writer, potential writing work was the subject title. And then it just clicked. This is frigging Matpat, the game theory guy. Yeah, it turns out while I was on vacation, Matpat had emailed me asking if I wanted to be a part of his writing team as a freelancer. He really liked my video on Poppy and thought I would be a good addition to the team, as I could bring the more darker web series like Don't Hug Me I'm Scared and Salad Fingers to the table. So basically, I could write a game theory or film theory script and it would go up on one of his channels if he accepted. And if he really enjoyed it, I would be able to write as many scripts for him as I want as a freelancer. For those who don't know what that is, it basically means I would have a part-time job writing scripts for game theory while also being able to make the stuff on this channel too. Just to clarify, these scripts that I will be writing for him would be the actual videos Matpat makes himself. You know, the Five Nights at Freddy's, Mario is Insane, Ness's Sans, those kind of videos. While I may have some criticism towards some of his videos, I can't help deny that he is one of the people that got me into this over-analyzing community, I guess you could call it. And there are still odd videos out there that he makes that I do find rather intriguing. So I thought this would be a really cool opportunity to see what I would be allowed to write for him. Obviously, I would reply to him after a good amount of gloating to my friends about how game theory messaged me, only to find out that they got messages from him too. Yeah, it turns out he was messaging quite a few of the smaller YouTubers around me to write for him, which I think is a clever idea if you think about it. It creates somewhat of a small job for YouTubers that haven't quite made it yet, and Matpat can also keep up with the algorithm on YouTube by creating more content in less time. Anyway, after messaging him, he got back to me in just under 24 hours, basically saying that what he usually does for a new person to join the team is ask them to write an audition script. He said that he had a couple of suggestions for me, or I could suggest some of my own. I thought with this being an audition script, I'll ask him to suggest some of the ideas and see if I can pick any of them. He came back to me and suggested a few he thought would be up my street. One of them was Petscop. I feel like I shot myself in the foot with this one, because I actually addressed Petscop with this.
The show since the 4th episode came out. It looks really good. There is so much to talk about in that game. I think you could talk about this game for a whole hour and still miss so many things. I want to fully go into depth of this series at some point, but I have a couple of things coming up next month which may halt a theory this big. I could still do this one to be honest, but it just may take a little longer than the others. The main idea seems to be revolving around the incident that happened with the child Candace Newmaker. Adoption and abused children are a big running theme in this game.
But I believe there is so much more to it as well. About 2 weeks later, he uploads a Petscop theory that is covering the Candace Newmaker story. That's it. If I'd have known that's what he was looking for that theory, I would have just shut up and written the script for him. Petscop wasn't the only theory he suggested, though. Another one was Poppy Part 2, basically saying there were a lot more references to Mars Argo and other things, so I could create a Part 2 from his previous Poppy theory. But like I said in my older videos, I don't believe there is anything going on with Poppy anymore. There was last year, but ever since she became popular, that hidden story just kind of stopped. So I checked the other suggestions. One of them was a game that I hadn't heard of, another was Five Nights at Freddy's The Twisted Ones. He said he doesn't usually give out this for audition scripts, which I'm still skeptical to this day if that's true or not, but since I had dabbled in the FNAF area, he felt that I'd be up for the task. And all I was thinking at the time when I saw that was, no, I wouldn't. If I did a theory like that for my audition script, by the end of it, I'm gonna be rocking backwards and forwards in a corner like a madman. So I kind of steered away from stuff like that. I was very nervous to take any risks. I felt like if I was going to take risks, I would have to gain his trust first, and prove to him that I can make a good theory on something. I wanted something that wasn't too tough, but something that was good enough to impress him. So I looked through the other suggestions. There was one from Lazy Town. I assumed that he wanted to make one based off of the meme from the show that was going around the internet, and another was for Gravity Falls. Petscop and Gravity Falls seemed to be the two that stood out to me. However, Petscop would have taken some time to make, hence why I replied with that response above. The Gravity Falls theory he suggested had something to do with Bill Cipher coming back to life, but the theory would be explaining where exactly he would be coming back. Would it be another show? Then I remembered my old theory about Gravity Falls, and that Bill is alive in Stanley's mind, or at least that was my theory. It was pretty weak back then and was more of just a suggestion than anything else, but a lot more evidence had surfaced that really backed up this theory to make it stronger. Although at this point, while I did have more evidence for this theory, I still wasn't that confident in making it. But I thought, why not? I'll put all I can into this gravity falls theory. He then sent a template on how he likes his theories to be presented. I found this rather interesting because while I think everyone who has seen Matpat's videos before already knows the formula he uses, but there's just something rather fascinating about seeing it in its skeleton form. He likes his theories to be at least 3 pages long of 11-point Calibri or Times New Roman font, which is about 12 minutes. I think that's about a similar amount I have in my videos. Sometimes I aim for 20 minutes if it's a big theory or a review. 25 minutes is usually my maximum. But anyway, as I was doing my research on the theory, I was also analysing game theories videos, as I wanted to have a script that actually sounded like a film theory / game theory script. As I watched his videos on both channels, I tried to take note about what I enjoyed in his videos and what I didn't. So hopefully I could take more of what I enjoyed in his videos and focus more on those areas in my audition script. For instance, his openings usually involve a cheesy joke that relates to the topic at hand. While I think that's a very good idea, as I always told people to treat the first 5 seconds of your videos if it's a skippable ad, I don't really find any of the jokes he opens with that funny. I'm no better at making jokes anyway, so for me, this just seems a little too much in your face. But I really do enjoy his openings to his more spookier shows, like Five Nights at Freddy's, or at least his latest ones.
Why, with enough belief, you can even cheat death itself. Cheat death itself. Cheat death itself. Death itself. Death itself. Death itself.
You know, it really is uncanny how these two games overlap.
Say what you want about his theories, this is how to get someone's attention. I know he wouldn't be able to make a spooky opening for every video he does, but thankfully I wouldn't be writing for every video he does. So I can open up this gravity falls theory however I want. Okay, maybe not exactly however I want, but he's got some great editors, so maybe I could use this to my advantage with the opening. So I decided to open with something that related to my gravity falls theory. One part of my theory talks about a book that was found in the Bill Cipher statue hunt. In the book, it is revealed to have invisible ink on one of the pages. It's a picture of Grunkle Stan and Bill next to his head with his arm around Stan. Also, since the invisible ink is a big thing in the Gravity Falls show, people who are fans that see this opening will immediately understand it. Plus, the song that Bill Cipher sings in the finale is a huge piece of evidence I use in my theory, so I thought that'd be great to add to this opening. Here's my opening of my game theory script. It begins with a shot outside the Mystery Shack, revealing that it's nighttime and everyone is just about to go to bed. The shot then changes to a close-up of a wooden shelf inside the Mystery Shack, full of picture frames of the Pine Twins, Grunkle Stan, and friends. We hear Grunkle Stan and the twins say goodnight to each other in the background. Dipper. Goodnight, Mabel. Mabel. Goodnight, Dipper. Audio clips can be found in the episode Carpet Diem, 20 minutes and 30 seconds. A switch is heard and out go the lights. All the pictures on the shelf reveal they have invisible ink drawn over them. Nothing major, just things like trust no one. Matthew begins to sing a slower version of Bill Cipher's song, We'll Meet Again, as the camera begins to slowly pan across the shelf, revealing more innocent pictures covered in invisible ink by Bill Cipher. The shot ends, I'm not gonna sing that. The shot ends of an actual image from the Bill Cipher hunt of Grunkle Stan and Bill Cipher with his arm laid around him. Film theory title rolls. Matpat also mentioned that he likes to add jokes and pop culture references to keep the theory fresh and relevant. While I can understand why he chooses to do this, I'm not really the biggest fan of having jokes interrupting the theory, unless the segue into it is just so good I barely notice. I've tried it before in my videos too, and it just doesn't really come off. I felt since this wasn't exactly my script, I still needed to include something, so I came up with a plan to keep the whole script rather light-hearted except for the intro, and have a smaller joke appear in the lesser important parts of the theory. That way I could have the best of both worlds and just explain the theory more often. You control the story. Don't feel like you have to talk about everything. Focus on the strongest evidence and brush aside some of the weaker moments or parts that may contradict what you're trying to prove. Before I started writing my theory, this quote made me a little relieved that he wasn't too bothered about everything being explained. He even used an example. For a good example, look at my Mario is Mental series of videos. I really focus in the shoe grinding moment and avoid all the mention of good things Mario has done throughout the series. In that way, I'm able to direct viewer focus to what is going to be most compelling for the overall story I'm trying to tell. He still wants as much to be explained as possible, but not everything has to be, as it is just a pop culture theory after all. There was one key part of this Gravity Falls theory that I was planning to overlook due to the fact that I thought it contradicted everything. Basically, Essentially, it's a scene in a book that is potentially canon to the main story of Gravity Falls, but isn't fully confirmed, which is why I thought I might be able to get away with it. My theory would be that Bill would come back in Stanley's mind and begin controlling him. However, in this book for this specific page, which involves a giant axolotl, basically says that Bill will come back in a different form and a different time. At first, I thought this may contradict my theory until I realized I could actually work this into my theory, since Stanley's body would be a different form, and the universe he's in would easily be classed as a different time. Thankfully, because this is so vague, I could easily work it into my theory. As I continued my research, I think I managed to cover everything, or at least everything that I could think of that would help keep this theory strong without any evidence overlooked. Once I'd finished it, I sent it to my buddy, the Looney Turtle, to have a read over before I sent it to Game Theory. Looney already knew what the theory was before he read the script, as I told him. He came out of it saying even though he doesn't like this idea and doesn't want it to be true, it's pretty plausible, which made me incredibly relieved because this took nearly 2 to 3 weeks to put together, and the final outcome was having someone who hates the idea to actually say it was pretty good and believable. So I sent the script off and the waiting game began. A week went by and no response, which was really strange because every time I had messaged him before, he replied within less than 24 hours. I wasn't too surprised though, as this time he would need to read a 4-page script, so it's not too much of a shock that he would take a little longer to respond. But then 2 weeks went by and still no response, so I decided to send it again just in case he hadn't received it. And another week went by and still no response. Not even a yes, I've received it. All I got was radio silence. So I decided to get the game theorist business email and his assistant email, which he'd messaged to me in the very first email he'd ever sent, and I even selected the urgent button for my script. I basically said, I don't know if you've received this, but here's the script for Gravity Falls that you asked me for. I don't know if there's a problem with your email or mine, but if I don't get a response within 7 working days, I'll assume you just don't want to use the script. Thank you for reading. I sent it off and I got a response within 5 minutes. Not from Matpat though, his assistant, who probably had no idea what was going on. He basically said this month was rather busy and they're just playing catch up. He also said something like, oh, Matpat mentioned you the other day, which I highly doubt. So if they're just playing catch up, I would assume they would get back to me soon, right? 3 weeks go by. Might have been 4 actually. Nothing but radio silence. And what were once nerves and paranoia of sending off a script you'd worked hard on in hopes to get a small job on a pretty huge platform kind of just turned into frustration. All this time on a script that's probably never going to get used. I messaged his assistant again a few days ago, basically asking if I can have a confirmation to tell me the script is not going to get used, just so I can take it back and probably use it in my video, but I haven't had a response since. Looking back, I can only think of 2 things where I may have shot myself in the other foot. Alex Hirsch, the creator of Gravity Falls, had announced a graphic novel to be released in July of 2018. I thought this would be a great selling point to Matpat, as it would give us a great reason to make a Gravity Falls theory 2 years after the show ended. Matpat loves to make theories on movies and games that are popular at the time the video is uploaded, which is why Star Wars theories are usually uploaded a month before the movie's release, his Stranger Things theory was uploaded a day after Series 2 came out, and a Rick and Morty theory was released a day after the finale came out, and so forth. When I was selling this theory script to Matpat, maybe telling him that Gravity Falls won't be popular until July of next year wasn't the best idea. It's almost like he's put me on the back burner and waiting for Gravity Falls to become popular again before he even responds. But hey, that's just a theory. Or maybe I've just done something to upset him. But even then, if it's any of these things, you'd think he would have at least responded by turning down the script, rather than just choosing to stick to radio silence. I can only assume I spent too long on the script, as there was a 3-week gap in between me saying I'll make a Gravity Falls script and me actually sending it to him. Maybe he was looking for people who'd be fast at writing. If that's the case, then it's probably the reason why he didn't choose me. It's a real shame. I would have been really curious what exactly I could have created for his channel, especially since he has some really good editors, meaning I would have had a lot more freedom than I would for the scripts that I make right now. I know some of you are probably saying you should wait a little longer, maybe he'll respond. But honestly, if it's going to take 2 months, maybe more, just to respond to one script, I don't think it's worth it. Already by waiting this long, I've missed an opportunity to write a Hello Neighbor theory which I had for him, as I feel I have a better idea than his satanic theory, and it ties up a lot of loose ends that he was confused about. And if he really did want me on board, he'd be wanting to read my theory as soon as possible, or at least get someone else to read it. I think 2 months of radio silence is a pretty good hint he's not interested. The only time I got some kind of response in that 2 months was from his assistant, who only responded because I decided to include his email in that 4th message. His assistant had no communication to me before then. I wouldn't have really had much of a problem, but the thing is, he approached me to do this, which is why it's all the more confusing. Maybe he just wanted me to make a theory on all these events happening. Oh well, I guess it just wasn't meant to be. Thank you all for watching. I thought you guys might find this story rather interesting, as it's something you don't always hear about. I tried asking around to see if I could find anyone who may have been accepted by Matpat, but it doesn't seem like any of my friends ended up making the scripts like I did. So I'll never know. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.